Boom. Score.
Nailed it.
Victory. Quite a news cycle for the Royals. We learn the franchise may have a new owner by the end of 2019. John Sherman, who owns a minority stake in the Cleveland Indians, has emerged as a replacement for David Glass. Star columnists Sam Mellinger and Vahe Gregorian stopped by to talk about this latest major development for the Royals on SportsBeat KC, the sports podcast of the Kansas City Star, and presented by Big O Tires. I'm your host, Blair Kerkhoff, and it's Wednesday, August 28th. Sam Mellinger and Vahe Gregorian are here, and guys, I thought the most interesting thing that happened to the Royals this week was the pitching debuts of Alex Gordon and Humberto Arteaga. Turns out that's at least second this week because of the news that came down a day or two later that there have been conversations between the Glass family and John Sherman for the potential change in ownership of the Kansas City Royals. No small thing, a change in ownership. If this is indeed on track to occur, let's talk about what this would mean for the baseball operations and how the Kansas City Royals might be operated, might appear different than they do now. Sam, you wrote a column about it. I thought it was a terrific column that appeared in today's paper. How about your thoughts on what this means? It means everything, really, to the Royals, but what, in a practical application, what does it mean?
It's the second time in the history of the franchise that ownership will change, right? I know that there was some, you get into the weeds with Ewing Kauffman and the real estate guy whose name is escaping me right now that bought into 49% or whatever. There's the one. And then there's a board of directors. But basically, Ewing Kauffman and David Glass have been in charge of the Royals since day one. And now it'll be another person. Three people in more than a half a century. I'm trying to answer that question with some reporting this week about how it'll be different on the baseball operations. A couple things we know. He's from here. He is of here. I think that's important. He's a minority investor in the Indians. I think that's important. He's into baseball. Baseball is a love of his. It's a passion of his. People, and I do hope to have more in a story that will be in Sunday's paper and hopefully online before that. But people so far that I'm talking to that know him describe him as meticulous. They describe him as, not flashy, sort of more of a substance over style guy. I think you see that in that not much is known about him publicly. He made his money in energy, natural gas, started and developed two companies that, one of them has since merged. But basically these are wildly successful, revenues into the billions type of companies. But the kind of baseball fan that reads nerdy, and I mean that in a good way, like nerdy baseball books, wants to talk baseball and can talk. I've talked to people who, I talk baseball with John all the time. Oh, what do you talk about? It's more about business, the business side of baseball. But that's coming from somebody who's in business and not necessarily baseball. I talk to baseball with John all the time. Oh, what do you talk about? Oh, then this person's just a fan. He's like, we talk about like a home run that we saw last night, a moment. He's got sort of, that's the picture I'm getting so far. As far as like how baseball operations will change, I don't know that it will significantly. One way or the other. There's some people that'll tell you, he'll spend a little bit more to bring a winner, regardless of what it does to his own finances. I've talked to other people who say, no, it's going to be pretty much the same. Like we're going to try and operate, the way that we always have. So I don't know. And I don't think anybody can be certain of that right now. And we won't even be certain of that when this deal is done. We can only know that 3 years, 5 years down the road.
And we think, based on who you've talked to and other things I've read, that it could be done as early as by the end of 2019.
By the end of this calendar year, that's what I'm hearing. And again, that's could, not will. But it seems like they've gone pretty far down the road on this. And there's some owner meetings in November. That could be a time that I think that's the next time that the owners will be together. So it's accelerated. It's accelerated.
Don't you think, Vahe, that anytime there's a change in ownership, it's potentially frightening, right? I mean, there's just give you. I'm going to give you. I know you're not of Kansas City and haven't been here for about 5 or 6 years, but every time there's been an ownership change in Kansas City professional sports history or Major League sports history, it's followed by bad news. Except for the Glasses taking over from Ewing Kauffman, but when the Kings were sold to a Sacramento business group, they up and left. And when Charlie Finley bought the A's from Arnold Johnson, who brought him here from Philadelphia, the A's up and left. And it's just what happens when a new owner takes over. That's the frightening aspect of it. But it just seems like I don't get that sense with in this case.
I don't either, and of course it does, based on the experience and also just the dynamics of a change like this, it does send a little tremor through first, right? But if you look at his profile, or at least what we know of his profile, he is really invested in Kansas City culturally, in terms of being on such boards as the Kauffman Center, the National World War I Museum, a couple others, the Truman Presidential Library, all these things, these are very Kansas City things. So I perhaps superficially, I don't feel like any sort of real concern that he's got some notion in mind to do something like that. One other thing I wanted to go back to, though, too, that Sam was alluding to, is a little bit trying to understand, where he might be coming from in how he runs the business. And it was interesting to me, one of the things I came across last night was a Cleveland Plain Dealer story from last year that had somewhat of an extensive interview with him and with is it Paul Dolan?
I think,
the CEO, yeah. And he referred to John Sherman as his partner and got into how much he was involved in some of the business decisions. Things like the Edwin Encarnacion deal that he had input on that, and some other things that they seem to splurge might be too strong, but show a willingness to spend money on. Whether that picks up and applies over here in the model, it's tough to say. And I think Sam could speak to this better than I can. I'm sure you can too, Blair. But rather than a thought about whether the franchise would be up and moved, I do wonder, how do we know what a new owner would think of the current administration? I mean, just business as usual, faith in Dayton Moore. Seems like that would be logical that they would, but here they are. You might have gotten into this in your column a little bit, I think, Sam. Dayton's sort of set about a new charting a new course, or at least a restart course. How does that play into all this?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's part of this is a different level of what you just talked about, Blair, about uncertainty. That the kind of uncertainty you're talking about is, are they going to move to Montreal or whatever?
Yeah.
And
right. Vegas, the baseball team.
I always say, like, I'm not shocked by much, but I would be shocked if a guy that was involved in all Teach for America, Kansas City, and the Nelson Act, like all this stuff, and then he lives 15 minutes from the stadium, and now he's going to move him to. I
want to take that off the table immediately.
Yeah,
I do,
yeah.
And I think you can if this is the transition.
And that is part of why, even without knowing whether he will be willing to do, the Tigers owner, that spent wildly above Mike Ilitch, the Little Caesars guy, right?
Yep.
To spend wildly above the revenue that the team was bringing in just because he wanted to win. Or Ewing Kauffman in his later years, which didn't work out obviously. But even regardless of all that, this is about the best possible news of the post-Glass Royals, and not just because this guy is of here. I mean, he will be a local owner. He will be a local owner of the baseball team. We have not had a local owner, the Cliff Illig and and the Cerner guys, but from the Chiefs and the Royals, we haven't had it since Ewing Kauffman, right? And I think that matters on some level, if you've complained about that or worried about that or thought that was holding either franchise back over the years, like that is a plus. It's also because he's been doing it. And you just talked about this, Vahe, but he's been involved with a Major League Baseball team, and he's not 51%, but still, that matters. He's done the work. If you're looking to hire a head coach, like you look for previous experience a lot of times, and it's hard to imagine somebody with just at least superficially here a better set of credentials from here, has been involved in the business. Loves the sport, is not going to look at this, I'm sure he doesn't want to take a bath financially all the time, but, in some ways just, he's been a Royals season ticket holder. Like he's, he goes to games. He has a suite at Arrowhead. This is a guy that's into sports and is going to look at it, at least somewhat through the eyes of a fan.
By the way, just a quick aside, in a way, it's just sort of a cute anecdote, but in a way it's perhaps telling. When he was chairman of the search committee for the next CEO of the Kauffman Center, one of the things he said was that they sought people who had the vision of Ewing Kauffman. Mm-hmm. And I just thought that sort of comes a little full circle here in an interesting way to speculate about whether that vision applies to how he see whatever it is his responsibility, duty is to this community and the baseball team.
Yeah. And if I can say there's one thing real quick, again, I guess I sort of said this earlier, but we won't know. This is early days, and he hasn't talked publicly, and he probably won't. And to be honest, probably shouldn't until that thing is signed and the ink is dry and all that stuff. We will learn much more when he starts to talk publicly about what his intentions are and his vision. But even then, we won't. That's just a small piece of the pie. We'll know a lot more. It's like judging a draft class, you 3 to 5 years and see, it's one thing to say something, let's see, kind of how he operates. But just, again, superficially, this seems like the absolute best case scenario for a post-glass Royals.
Well, and I also like that his other experience in Major League Baseball has been with the organization that the Royals have been chasing for the last 3 years.
Yeah, what they did.
Bring that intel here to Kansas City. Our friends at Deep Background, with Dave Helling, Steve Vachrot, and Royals beat writer Lynn Worthy are going to get into this particular topic on a bigger level. Please listen to Deep Background for some more information on stadium issue. And that seems to be a sort of the second day topic in old school newspaper, the PM story, the afternoon story. We all laugh. Afternoon paper. But it's rekindled the topic of a downtown ballpark. This the possibility of the owner transition. It's way too early to talk about something like this, but the lease is up. Is it 2031?
This is about the time where, those discussions, you can't wait till 2030 to make a decision on that. Right. And I think this is about, in the next 2 to 5 years, you better have something concrete. And look, there are years to go on this, but my sense has been, and this is not a guess, but that the appetite inside the organization for a downtown ballpark is much bigger. They are much more interested in doing that than the last time around. And part of the reason why it didn't happen the last time around was the owner didn't want it. He liked where it is, and that's where he wanted to be. And so all this talk of anything else was sort of a moot point. And my sense is that John Sherman is interested and willing to explore that to its fullest extent.
One quick point of clarification. I think you actually said this in as many words, but the point you're making is the enthusiasm within the organization other than the ownership.
Yes, below the ownership.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
You've written about this topic too, Sam, a TV contract for the Royals. They are at the doorstep they need a new one.
Yep.
And do you think that some of this that may have been going on in the background has delayed at least any kind of decision, or the Royals don't know, or we don't know what the Royals TV contract's going to be for next year, and that is such an important piece of their financial future.
Yeah, sure. It sounds like Jeff Flanagan had a piece, MLB.com last week, and the financial sort of realm for them has always been about 50-ish million a year.
A year, right.
Which would be twice what they're getting now and almost 3 times what they were getting at the beginning of the current contract. So it's an instant bump. That thing has been delayed for a million reasons. But I don't think the ownership question has been a huge part of that. It's been more, the TV side of this has been in upheaval of, companies merging and, nobody knowing who's the real boss and all that. I mean, there's just been a lot of really, giant and fast moving parts on that. But that is absolutely, you just said this, it's the single most important revenue stream that the Royals have, and they're not going to be in a position to compete with the Dodgers or Cubs or whatever, but they will at least, end the days of being 50 games out of first place in the TV money.
Okay.
And I would imagine, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I would imagine somewhat similar to, in 2006, Dayton Moore is hired days before the draft. And it's the only time that, and I think this is still true, right? The only time that the Royals had 1-1, but he would not officially take the job until after the draft because he'd been working for the Braves, didn't think that was right, and all that. But the Royals sure went from leaning heavily on Andrew Miller to taking Luke Hochevar. I would imagine, somewhat analogous. I don't think they signed that deal if John Sherman doesn't think it's the right move.
Just a quick thought that may not exactly apply, but I do wonder, does the value of the Royals change with a purchase? In other words, the perception of them as worth $1 billion, if that's really the right number, right?
That's what Forbes, if anything, Forbes has usually, the estimates have been lower than what the purchase prices ended up.
So, and was the Glass purchase like $225 million?
No, it was 96.
Oh gosh,
Right,
I wonder what
right.
the 220. Oh, that might have been the last value. Oh, that was an Indians figure. That was
96 million
bought for.
in April of 2000.
Okay, and the Indians were purchased, I think, for 225, right around that, whenever that purchase was. Anyway, I'm just telling you where that number came from. It wasn't that random. But so 10 times as much. Does the actual transaction, a purchase, enhance the club's value? We've now said, okay, yeah, they paid $1 billion. It's more valuable, therefore it's a better TV commodity. I don't know. Maybe losing 100 games back-to-back seasons is a more pivotal force in this.
One thing that I've learned about TV contracts over these last few years is that a lot of factors that I or you might think are really important in these things just aren't. It's a lot. Most of it, the lion's share, is just formulaic. It's how many TV sets are in your immediate market, and then secondarily, how many TV sets are sort of in the region, and that's pretty much it. The TV ratings matter a little bit, but not, networks would kind of rather have, a big pond than a big fish, sort of,
right.
It's the potential audience.
Yeah.
Winning doesn't matter. I mean, it matters, but not so much because these are 10 to 15 year contracts a lot of times. So it doesn't really matter what you did last season or what you're doing right now. A lot of it is formulaic.
I think in the terms of a TV deal, ideally a team will sign a 10 to 15 or whatever TV deal, and I think that the TV partner in this case kind of rolls the dice and hopes that the team will be good at some point in that, especially if it's a small market like the Royals, and they will maximize those numbers. There's like 900,000 TV households in Kansas City. Their ratings were phenomenal they're still good for a team that loses as much as the Royals, but in 15-16 they were just phenomenal, which means the Royals were maximizing their exposure. Yep. And if the renegotiation had come up then, I think the Royals would have cashed in pretty big.
Yeah, it would have been bigger, but not. We're not talking about like $80 million a year.
No, it would have been Boston big.
Instead of 50, maybe it's 55 or something like. Which $5 million. You can get a middle reliever or whatever. Right. So yeah, but it's just I've been surprised at that over and over. I mean, to the point where like the first time I heard that, I was like, I don't know if I should be trusting this person because that doesn't make any sense. But then you hear it 2, 3, 4 times from the people that live in this world, and well, okay, I guess that makes sense on some level.
All right, let's wind down this part of Sports Beat KC with this question, answering this question. One of the reasons that this came as a little bit of a surprise was the prospective owner is not Dan Glass.
Yeah.
And what take us through that? What you know about that situation?
Yeah, I mean, Dan has been the president, club president since day one of his father's purchase, and has been involved. You know, I got into this a little bit in the column, and I hope I don't miss, I'm trying to choose my words carefully here. Dan Glass developed a bad reputation in the office and around baseball in some ways when he was, getting a little over-involved in the eyes of many in real baseball decisions. Backed off of that, backed away from the club a little bit, still had the president's title. And then in more recent years, and just vaguely 3 to 5 to 7-ish years, has been more involved and is kind of, at least what I would consider a classic president role. Like all the VPs report to him. And if there's a problem, they go to him. And he's sort of a liaison between that level and the owner. And has been much better thought of, at least in the office and by extension, a little bit around baseball because of that. And he stayed out of baseball decisions. But you're right, like there's a lot of people inside the organization that thought Dan is the next guy. And that was not viewed as a positive, And I'm trying to figure out how to say this without sounding insulting. I don't mean this insulting. Dan, from what I can tell, he's, treats people well, nice guy, all that stuff. But, when it comes to business, you're ownership material or you're not. And I know there were people inside the organization that just thought, man, if Dan's going to be the guy, like that could be a problem. And, maybe Dan, I've also heard from some people, maybe Dan didn't want the job, but either way, whether it's Dan saying, I don't know. And I've heard people speculate that, speculation, but these are people that know Dan and work with Dan. Think, you know what, maybe if his dad wasn't going to be involved, maybe that was it for him, and let's move on and do something else. Now, it's a bit of an easier decision when, the result of that means $1 billion into your family, minus estate taxes or whatever. But
I think we can't understate that or overstate that point, right? I mean, the implications of this are quite fine for Dan Glass.
Yes.
Right? I mean, I think that in some way he'll benefit from the
he's going to eat
$900 million profit.
Right. Right. Yeah, but I mean, it's just, whether that was Dan saying, I don't want the job, that's not for me, or whether it's David saying, you know what, like this is an institution here and we need to give somebody that has the kind of experience of John Sherman, whatever. This is a really good thing. We may never know the essential truth of that, but it would be so interesting to know, right? At how those talks went between them. Like, well, son or dad, I don't think. It'd be fascinating. And Dan, he's involved in other stuff too. He's got some, charitable interests and activities, and his wife does too, from what I understand. So maybe he is, I think, about 60 years old. That's a lot to take on. Maybe he'd rather, do the charities and be involved that way. That makes sense.
All right, let's take a break, and we'll be back after this.
The biggest tire sale of the year could only happen at Big O Tires, but you've only got 2 weeks to get 2 free tires. That's right, 2 free tires when you buy 2 now at Big O Tires through September 9th. Just buy 2 select tires and you'll receive 2 free with the purchase of a 1-year alignment and tire protection package. That's half off your tires at Big O Tires. It's the biggest tire sale of the year through September 9th only. Buy 2 tires, get 2 free. Now at Big O Tires. Big on service, guaranteed low prices. For the location nearest you, go to bigotires.com.
Hey, it's Blair. Hey, we have a special subscription offer for SportsBeat KC listeners. unlimited digital access to the Kansas City Star's award-winning sports coverage. Sign up now for 1 year of Sports Pass for access to all the sports news, features, and columns we have to offer. And it's only $30. That's a 40% savings off our regular rate. For your convenience, your subscription will automatically renew after the initial term at $50 unless you tell us to cancel. A lot of subscription services won't tell you that. They'll just sneak it on there. We just told you. Your subscription helps support the sports coverage of kansascity.com and the Kansas City Star. Please visit kansascity.com/sportsbeatkc offer to get this special offer. And as always, thanks for listening. We're back on Sports Beat KC with Vahe, Gregorian, and Sam Mellinger. We're going to talk a little football now. And the question on the table, Chiefs at Green Bay Thursday night, fourth and final preseason game of the season. Will these be the final fourth preseason games in NFL history? Vahe.
Of course, the first thing I would say is we can only hope. And I guess we've got the collective bargaining agreement, am I saying that right, coming up in the spring. It would seem that one way or another this is getting out on the table, right? Because there's been certainly ownership floating the idea of a 18-game regular season and shrink wrapping it to 2 preseason games. I do like the Mellinger doctrine on this, the idea of why do you need to add 2 in the regular season to take 2 off the table in the preseason? But of course, the lingering question is always going to be the money that can be charged in here. Blair, we were talking about this recently, and I remember you reminding me of the fact that it used to be 6 preseason games. And am I remembering right? Was the Super Bowl winner playing the College All-Stars, and was that a 7th game?
Yes, that happened until I think into the late 70s.
What were they smoking?
What a crazy idea.
So it seems ridiculous now to have 4.
Can you imagine today? I'm sorry, but like the idea, I forgot about that part of it. The idea of like part of winning the Super Bowl is that you now have to play another game against some college kids.
And I remember being a kid loving that game. I couldn't wait to see that game.
Oh, I'd watch it.
Yeah, you watch it.
But look, it's and as much as it's tempting to be just talking about our own benefit from this, about how few writing opportunities we perceive off of these preseason games, it's terrible for the fan experience. I think. I know there's some diehards, right, that are like, you guys are dopes. There's so much drama in these, that 52nd and 53rd job. It's like, really, it's not that much drama. And how much more are they learning than they would learn from just 2 games? Just reprioritize who you're playing when.
First of all, Blair, can you ask that question again? I just want to hear it in my ears again.
Sam, the question to you now is...
This is like a lullaby. Keep going.
Will this be the final week of 4th preseason games in the NFL history?
That's the good stuff. That is the good stuff.
I just sense I sense a different vibe this year.
I do too.
Than I have in previous years about this.
To underscore what Vahe just said, it is incredibly important to 51 through 55 on the roster. But like the numbers don't lie about TV ratings, attendance. There's some people that care deeply about it, but they're going to care deeply about whatever. I mean, this is about, at some level, entertainment value. And, spoiler alert, like if they do take away 2 preseason games, it will not be a money loser for the NFL. They will figure out a way to get that back, whether it's by, I wonder if you're going to add to the regular season, it's hard to do that and still pretend that you care about player safety. But what if you added 1 game and added a bye week? And, some teams will have, I saw a coach, and now I can't remember, an NFL coach said, a lot of teams, the Chiefs don't do this, but a lot of teams have, what do they call it, joint practice or, scrimmages.
Right. Chiefs used to do it when they were in Wisconsin.
Yeah, with the Vikings, televise those. You can sell that. And so maybe between that and 1 more regular season game, maybe that's more revenue. I know we always talk about like ticket prices being the same in the regular season, but they make a hell of a lot more money. And if the NFL makes a hell of a lot more money on a regular season game than a preseason game. So there does seem to be, for the first time that I can remember. Not that I've been around for forever, but sort of an acknowledgement on both sides, certainly from the player side in some ways, but also from the owner side that, this is just too much. We don't need 4.
I wonder what the implication for training camp would be. Would they start about the same time? Would they shave a week off of that and maybe start a little bit later?
I guess it would really depend on what they're going to add to the regular season, right?
That's right.
If they do, and circling back to Sam's point, which really should be the point underscoring all this, the idea of player safety. I mean, you would think that maybe it does tighten that window, right? That would be part of the overall discussion.
Not that this had anything to do with preseason, but the enduring image of 2019 NFL preseason is going to be fans in Indianapolis booing Andrew Luck as he left the field when word got out that he was retiring. Not exactly the image that you want to sell,
right?
If you're the NFL. So.
And one thing you've written about it kind of extensively, Sam, but you got into a lot of the numbers and a lot of the prime names in the game have been held back much more than ever before. Mm-hmm. There's a little part of me that wonders if this is just kind of a rigged up way to start driving that. Well, nobody's playing anyway, so yeah, let's do it. I mean, there's a little part of me in the back of my mind wondering, like, oh, this is kind of interesting. A little collusion on this.
The league is getting younger, in particular with head coaches, and I don't think it's a coincidence that the Rams and the Bears are two of the teams that are full on don't play anybody in the preseason. And Sean McVay, I think, I'd have to double check this, but I think he's 14 years old. And Matt Nagy is in his 30s, I think, still. And, I think as the league gets younger, and you never know, like different people have different perspectives, but as the league gets younger, that sure seems to be like, what are we doing? Like, why are we beating these guys up all the time?
It's actually good to get a fresh perspective on this from coaches like that.
And, this is sort of the same thing you said, but I think of this all the time, that there's at some point it's, the emperor's wearing no clothes and we just keep doing things because it's the way we've done it.
Right.
Well, then you stop and pause and say, why?
Yeah.
If memory serves me, it took a storm of biblical proportions to end that college all-star Super Bowl game. I think this one of those Steelers teams was in it, and a storm blew through Chicago because it was always at Soldier Field, and a storm blew through Chicago, and they ended that game in the third quarter, and hasn't been seen since.
So they didn't pick up the suspended game later.
Blew both teams into Lake Michigan. So okay, hey, it's. There were a couple of college football games last weekend, but this is the first full weekend of college football. I kind of like it because the NFL doesn't play after the Thursday night exhibition games, and college football has, for the only time this year, it has the weekend all to itself. I think it's pretty cool for the colleges, and there's some some stories with our local 11s, 2 new coaches, right, at Kansas State and Kansas, and a lot of optimism at Missouri. Vahe, you and I spoke to Jim Sturck yesterday on the occasion of the announcement of the Missouri-Arkansas game coming to Arrowhead next year. I think the most newsworthy thing to come out of that, other than the announcement itself, was you asked Jim Sturck about the bowl ban, and I don't think I've heard him as optimistic as he was when you asked him.
I did feel like, there maybe was an asterisk or two in there, but I do feel like he felt like if they're making the right decision, of course it's, and they've sort of had that stance all along, that the right decision is one that favors Missouri here. But I think he also seemed to feel that some things he saw in the Mississippi State findings the other day and the punishment played to their favor. Now, what we don't know is that reflected a process that was changed, tweaked after Missouri was already in this. So, is that in a separate silo of some sort? He thinks not, because the context is still an NCAA context. What are you saying to the membership?
I think it's a spirit of the rules kind of thing.
Yes, and
absolutely.
And Sam wrote a terrific column right when this first came out. Just noting it for the farce that it was. For a penalty for one rogue tutor that the school, by all indications, acted as promptly and admirably as it could, and then this. So that's fascinating, though, in itself, because they have to play anyway. And he did say he thought it could last until November.
And he was
but-
using an example. Ole Miss waited until November
that's
a
right.
year ago
That's
to
right.
determine to learn its fate.
But he afterwards we talked a little more casually, and he seemed to feel like he thought that there was a real chance it'd be solved in September. But I've just been endlessly fascinated with how Barry has, from minute one, kept his eye on the ball and said, well, we're playing the games. We got 12 games. We got 12 opportunities. And I maybe it's the only thing you can do, right? But he hasn't stopped to whine about it. He hasn't stopped to allow it to be something that's some sort of impediment. And I think the fact that no players transferred out of there when they could have, in the wake of this news, it's real testimony to his reach with his team.
Including the quarterback who transferred in, got the news, and decided to stay. Kelly Bryant, the Clemson transfer.
In his last season.
Yeah,
right?
in his final season.
Yeah.
Could have had a free pass to go somewhere else, decided to stay at Missouri. So KU and K-State, Sam, opening up this weekend. Chris Kleiman at K-State. They're playing Nichols and KU with Les Miles. Indiana State comes in. Someone reminded me that would have been a hell of a basketball game about 40 years ago.
Yeah.
The Sycamores and Jayhawks. But what's the what's the more interesting of those two?
To me, it's K-State, and part of that is I just think they're more ready to go. I think Skylar Thompson is going to be really good. Like I think he's going to make a jump and be better than I think people are expecting. If I'm wrong about him, I'm wrong about K-State. But I just think that's a team that might be able to take a step forward. I like the Kleiman hire, even when it happened. I know K-State took a lot of criticism for that. I like that hire then. I think he's a good coach, and I think he's a really good fit for Skylar Thompson. I think they can do some things. A bowl game is certainly within reach, and maybe 6, 7, maybe even 8 wins. KU, I think there's more sort of certainly national curiosity in Les Miles than Chris Kleiman. But the reason, and I'm curious, like I'll watch if it's on TV. Is it on?
I'll tell you what.
Is it ESPN Plus?
You think that's just a throwaway question, but it's a little complicated now because you have to buy a subscription to ESPN Plus to access both the KU and the K-State games this week. This week only. Yeah. But you're in for at least a month or whatever the terms are.
Yeah.
But that's new for the Big 12. They're unveiling their ESPN Plus package this weekend.
I do have an ESPN Plus subscription. I will look forward to watching that. But the thing, like for me with Les, I just don't think that there's that much to learn from this game. And I look at his road as a long one at KU. I think that I know they won 3 games last year, which, for KU was an improvement. But I think that the last coach took the job criticizing Charlie Weiss for going this heavy JUCO and leaving the cupboard bare. And then I think David Beatty got to a point of desperation and did the exact same thing. And I think that, as much as we can talk about Puka Williams, who is a stud, won't play on Saturday, but a stud. I don't think they have all that much talent there. And I think this is a really long road. My expectations for KU this year are really low. Long term, I'm probably more curious just because it seems like a kind of a wildly interesting situation there. But just Saturday, I think we'll learn more about K-State than we will KU.
And Kansas has recruited well. In the areas where you can measure how Kansas, progress of football of a new coach, they have recruited well, and Les Miles seems to, he's generated excitement and exposure for Kansas with, and that ESPN Plus subscription also entitles you to the 14 show series of Les Miles at Kansas, whatever this thing that ESPN is doing. So, all right, guys, great conversation. Thanks a lot, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, Blair.
Thanks, Blair.
Links to the stories we discuss can be found in the show notes on kansascity.com, facebook.com/trueblue, and the True Blue app. Thanks to producers Leah Becerra and Kathy Liu. Leah is doing double duty today, producing Deep Background, the Star's podcast for news and politics, hosted by Dave Helling. The prospect of a downtown stadium with new ownership will be covered on that episode. Give it a listen. If you're listening to us on Apple Podcast, help us out by rating and reviewing SportsBeat KC. We'd love to hear from you, and your review could help us reach more listeners. Our next podcast will originate from Green Bay after the Chiefs meet the Packers on Thursday night. Hope you tune in then.